Stop what you are doing for a moment. Put the noise down. Let your mind become still. You have asked for help more than once, and the answer has not looked the way you expected. That is why this message is meeting you now. Listen carefully. Because one pattern in your life is about to make sense. You have been wondering if God has been silent. You have prayed, waited, watched, and tried to understand what keeps changing around you. Some doors opened just enough to give you hope, then closed without warning. Some people became distant. Some plans lost their energy, and you started asking whether you had somehow missed your moment. There were nights when you replayed the same decision again. You asked yourself if you should move forward, hold back, speak, stay quiet, leave, or wait. The answer never felt simple, and every time you thought clarity was near, another layer of noise appeared. You began to fear that you could no longer hear God the way you once did. But hear this without rushing past it. The silence you fear may not mean abandonment. The closed door may not mean rejection. The distance may not mean loss. Sometimes help arrives by removing what keeps demanding your attention, because God can protect your future by refusing to let your old environment follow you into it. You know this feeling. You enter a room and something in you immediately becomes alert. You notice tension before anyone says a word. You feel when a conversation is empty. You sense when someone is smiling but carrying another intention underneath. And lately that sensitivity has become stronger, while your patience for noise has become much smaller. At the same time, you are tired of explaining yourself. You used to defend every decision. You used to give long reasons for why you needed space, why you changed your mind, or why something no longer felt right. Now you often choose silence. You walk away. You keep more things between you and God, because constant explanation has begun to feel exhausting. There is also a strange heaviness around certain choices. Nothing looks wrong on the surface, but something inside you refuses to settle. You try to reason yourself into peace. You list the benefits. You tell yourself to be grateful, yet the uneasiness remains, as if your spirit keeps touching a boundary your mind is still trying to cross. Chosen one, that inner conflict matters. Do not treat every hesitation as weakness. Do not assume every delay means you are afraid. There are moments when wisdom slows you down. Before your emotions can carry you somewhere, your spirit already knows is wrong. The difficulty is learning which hesitation is fear and which hesitation is protection. That is one reason this season has felt so confusing. You are not only deciding what you want, you are learning how to recognize what brings peace and what only brings excitement. Those are not the same thing. Excitement can be loud, peace can be quiet. And quiet things are easy to miss when your mind has been trained to chase constant stimulation. Maybe that describes your recent weeks. You wake up and reach for your phone before your thoughts have even settled. Messages are waiting. Problems are waiting. Other people need answers. Your mind begins running before your feet touch the floor. Then you wonder why prayer feels crowded, why stillness feels difficult, and why guidance feels farther away. You have carried too many voices. Some belong to family. Some belong to old disappointments. Some belong to people who never understood your calling, but still felt qualified to judge your choices. Their words stayed in you longer than you realized. Now every important decision must fight through a room full of opinions before it reaches your heart. And that is why you sometimes ask God the same question again and again. You are not always asking because no answer came. Sometimes you are asking because the answer did not agree with the outcome you wanted. Sometimes the first clean knowing felt too simple. So you searched for another sign, another confirmation, and another voice to make the decision feel safer. There is no shame in admitting that. Many people do it. They call endless checking wisdom because they are afraid to call it fear. But fear has a way of dressing itself in careful language. It tells you to wait for one more sign. It tells you to ask one more person. It tells you that obedience is only safe after uncertainty disappears completely. Yet uncertainty does not always disappear before the next step. Sometimes it disappears after the step. A door can remain unclear until you walk toward it. A relationship can remain confusing until you stop trying to rescue it. A calling can remain distant until you make room for it. Faith often becomes visible only when movement gives it shape. This does not mean you should act recklessly. It means you should stop demanding perfect emotional comfort before every faithful decision. There is a difference between peace and certainty. Certainty wants every detail. Peace can move with only enough light for the next step. And God has often guided people with enough light, not with the entire map. Think about David. He was anointed before his circumstances looked royal. He carried a promise while still returning to ordinary fields. There was a long distance between what had been spoken over him and what his daily life appeared to confirm. If he had judged the promise only by the scenery, he could have believed nothing had happened. But something had happened. Identity had shifted before position changed. Heaven had named what the environment could not yet see. That is important for you. There are seasons when God changes your inner assignment before he changes your visible surroundings. The delay between those two moments can feel like confusion, but it can also be formation. You may be standing in that distance now. Part of you knows the old way no longer fits. Another part keeps waiting for the new way to become obvious. That middle space can feel empty. It can make you question everything. Yet the middle is often where old dependencies lose their grip, because you can no longer lean on familiar patterns for direction. This is why some relationships feel different. You are not necessarily angry with anyone. You simply cannot return to the same level of access. Conversations that once entertained you now leave you drained. Places that once felt exciting now feel crowded. And the version of you that needed constant approval is beginning to feel unfamiliar. Do not rush to label every separation as an attack. Some separations are simply evidence that your appetite changed. When your inner life changes, certain environments stop feeding you. You notice what you once ignored. You feel the cost of staying around what constantly scatters your attention. What looked harmless before now feels expensive. You have also noticed how quickly your energy changes around certain people. You can be calm before a conversation, then feel strangely heavy afterward. You can spend 10 minutes listening to someone complain and carry their words for hours. That does not make you fragile. It means you must become more careful about what you allow to live in your inner space. A watchman cannot watch clearly while staring at every distraction. An intercessor cannot carry every burden without learning where responsibility ends. A chosen one cannot answer every voice and still expect the voice of God to remain the loudest. Your sensitivity needs boundaries, because sensitivity without boundaries becomes exhaustion. And exhaustion changes how you interpret everything. When you are tired, a closed door can feel like punishment. Silence can feel like abandonment. Delay can feel like failure. A simple correction can feel like rejection. The problem is not always the event. Sometimes the problem is the condition from which you are trying to understand the event. That is why rest can become spiritual clarity. Silence can become protection. Distance can become medicine for attention. When the noise settles, you begin to hear what was always there beneath it. You recognize that some answers were not missing. They were buried under urgency, fear, pressure, and the need to make everyone comfortable with your next move. There are moments when God helps by adding something. There are also moments when God helps by taking something away. He can remove access. He can close a path. He can expose a motive. He can let a conversation reveal what you were refusing to see. And because removal hurts, you may call the help a loss before you understand what it protected. This is where many people turn back. They ask God for freedom, then panic when familiar chains begin to loosen. They ask for discernment, then resist what discernment reveals. They ask for a new season, then keep negotiating with the habits that belong to the old one. They want change without the discomfort of leaving familiar ground. Chosen one, you cannot carry every old certainty into a new assignment. Some of the confusion you feel is the sound of two identities pulling in opposite directions. One identity knows how to survive by pleasing, explaining, and overthinking. The other identity is learning to trust, observe, and move without asking everyone for permission. The first identity kept you safe in earlier seasons. Do not hate it. Do not shame it. It learned to read every mood in the room because peace once depended on keeping other people calm. It learned to over-prepare because mistakes felt dangerous. It learned to ask for approval because rejection once carried a cost you did not want to pay again. But survival wisdom can become a prison when the season changes. What protected you yesterday can limit you tomorrow. Hyper-awareness can become overthinking. Kindness can become people-pleasing. Patience can become avoidance. Carefulness can become delay. And discernment becomes difficult when fear keeps borrowing the language of wisdom. That is why God sometimes begins by changing your tolerance. You stop tolerating what drains you. You stop laughing at what once made you uncomfortable. You stop pretending certain conversations are harmless. You stop forcing yourself to remain available to everyone. And at first, this new boundary can make you feel guilty. But guilt is not always proof that you are doing something wrong. Sometimes guilt is the echo of an old role losing control. If people were used to unlimited access, your boundary can feel cruel to them. If you were used to rescuing everyone, your own rest can feel selfish. Yet a boundary can be holy when it protects the assignment God gave you. You may have noticed this in small ways. Your phone stays unanswered longer. You no longer rush to fix every misunderstanding. You do not chase people who become distant. You feel less desire to prove that your intentions were pure. Something in you is learning that truth does not become more true because everyone agrees with it. This is not coldness, it is maturity. Coldness closes the heart. Maturity closes unnecessary doors while keeping the heart clean. You can forgive without reopening access. You can love without returning to chaos. You can pray for someone without allowing their instability to become your daily atmosphere. There is a reason this matters to the message God is bringing you today. The next chapter of your life will require a quieter inner room, not a perfect life, not a life without problems, a quieter inner room. You need enough silence to recognize the first clean instruction before fear, memory, and outside opinion start arguing with it. Some of you already know exactly what this refers to. There is one decision you keep revisiting. You felt the answer earlier than you admitted, then you talked yourself away from it. You looked for evidence against your own discernment. You told yourself you needed more time. While part of you knew time was not the real issue, others are facing a different kind of decision. It is not about leaving, it is about beginning. You keep feeling pulled toward a project, a conversation, a move, a new boundary, or a new responsibility. The idea returns when you are quiet. It becomes weaker when you are surrounded by noise. Then it returns again when the room becomes still. Pay attention to that pattern. What returns in peace deserves examination. What only survives in panic deserves caution. God is not required to compete with the loudest part of your day. Sometimes you must create a place where guidance does not have to fight through endless input just to reach your awareness. This is why some of you wake during the quietest hours and immediately feel unusually alert. The house is still. The notifications have stopped. No one needs anything from you. For a few minutes, the inner noise is lower. And in that space, thoughts arrive that feel cleaner, calmer, and strangely more honest than they do during the day. Do not turn that into superstition. The hour itself is not the point. The quiet is the point. The reduced noise is the point. The absence of other demands is the point. You are discovering what your inner world sounds like when everyone else has stopped speaking into it. The same thing happens in nature. A muddy pool cannot reflect the sky while everything is constantly stirring the water. But when the movement settles, the reflection appears without force. Nothing new had to be placed in the water. The image was already available. Stillness simply made the surface capable of receiving it clearly. Your inner life works in a similar way. There are truths you already know but cannot feel while everything is moving. There are decisions you have already sensed but cannot trust while every fear is speaking. There are boundaries you know you need but cannot establish while guilt keeps creating another emergency. That is why you must stop calling every pause a delay. Some pauses are where perception returns. Some quiet seasons are where your inner sight becomes clean again. Some unanswered moments are not empty at all. They are removing the pressure that kept you reacting instead of discerning. And here is something else. God may be helping you by making certain distractions less satisfying. What used to numb you does not work the same way. Entertainment feels empty sooner. Endless scrolling makes you restless. Repeating the same conversations feels exhausting. You are becoming aware of how much attention you used to give away without noticing. Attention is not a small thing. What holds your attention begins to shape your inner atmosphere. If fear holds it, everything looks dangerous. If resentment holds it, every memory becomes evidence. If approval holds it, every decision becomes a public vote. But when truth holds your attention, the noise begins to lose authority. This is why your attention has become part of the battle. Not because every distraction is evil, not because every device is a trap, but because a scattered mind has difficulty recognizing a quiet instruction. If everything is urgent, nothing is clear. If every voice is equal, wisdom becomes almost impossible to distinguish. Chosen one. You have spent enough time believing clarity must arrive as a dramatic sign. Sometimes clarity arrives as a repeated, quiet conviction that refuses to leave. It does not scream. It does not threaten. It does not flatter you. It simply remains. And after the excitement fades, it is still there. That kind of knowing can be easy to dismiss because it feels ordinary. You expect heaven to shake the room. Instead, you keep receiving the same gentle correction. Stop going back. Call them. Begin. Rest. Forgive. Wait. Leave it alone. Protect your peace. Finish what you started. These instructions can look small while changing an entire future. The life-changing message is not being revealed all at once yet. You need the foundation first. Because if I gave you the conclusion before you understood the pattern, your old habits could turn even that conclusion into another thing to question. You would hear it, feel it, then immediately ask whether it was really meant for you. So notice what has already been established. Your season has contained unusual removal. Your tolerance for noise has changed. Your need for approval is weakening. Your inner world becomes clearer in quiet spaces. Certain instructions keep returning, and the things that once distracted you are losing their power to satisfy. Those pieces belong together. They are not separate frustrations. They form a pattern of preparation. Something in you is being trained to recognize truth faster and protect it longer. You are learning to stop handing every sacred impression to people who were never assigned to interpret your life. If this is describing the season you are in, leave one simple amen below. Do not do it for attention. Let it mark the moment you stop dismissing what your spirit has been noticing. A small agreement can become a line in the sand. You are saying that confusion will no longer have unlimited authority over your next step. Then come back here. Do not let the comment become the end of the moment. The deeper work is still ahead. Because there is another layer to clarity that many people never connect with spiritual discernment. It involves what constant pressure and overstimulation can do to your ability to focus, recognize patterns, and remain internally settled. There is a reason some people feel far more clear after a period of deep quiet. There is a reason insight can return when mental noise drops. There is a reason childhood often feels connected to stronger imagination, faster learning, and a more immediate sense of wonder. Later, we will connect that pattern to what happens inside the brain. For now, do not chase the explanation. Just hold the question. What if part of what you call spiritual confusion has been intensified by a mind that has forgotten how to become still long enough to recognize what it already knows? What if restoration involves both the spirit you protect and the attention you train? That question matters because God does not need to become louder to guide you. Sometimes you need fewer competing voices. You do not need a new identity. You need to stop drowning the identity that was already being formed. You do not need to manufacture a calling. You need enough clarity to recognize the next faithful step. This is where the message begins to turn. Up to now, you may have believed God would help by opening the door you wanted, restoring the person you lost, or giving you the outcome you requested. But the first form of help may be the very thing you have been grieving. The closed door may be help. The silence may be help. The separation may be help. The growing discomfort with old habits may be help. And in the next part, you will see why divine help often feels like loss before it feels like freedom. Because protection rarely asks permission from the thing it is removing. Chosen one, now we go deeper. The first truth was simple. Help does not always arrive as addition. Sometimes it arrives as removal. That is where many hearts become confused, because they asked God for rescue and expected a door to open. While heaven began by closing one, they were still trying to force. A closed door can feel personal. You wonder what you did wrong. You replay the conversation. You revisit the opportunity. You question your timing. And when the same path refuses to open again, your mind begins searching for a mistake that may not exist, because you still believe every blocked road means failure. But not every blocked road is punishment. Some roads close because your next season cannot be built inside the same environment that trained you to doubt yourself. Some people cannot follow you into what comes next. Some opportunities look generous while quietly demanding that you shrink your values to keep them. This is why divine help can feel uncomfortable at first. Protection often removes access before it explains the reason. Redirection often interrupts momentum before it reveals the better route. And when you are emotionally attached to one outcome, even mercy can feel like loss for a little while. Think about Joseph. He carried a dream before he carried authority. He was rejected by his own brothers, pushed into a pit, taken far from home, and later placed inside circumstances he never would have chosen. From the outside, each turn looked like another contradiction. Yet the contradiction did not cancel the calling. The pit was not the promise, but it did move him away from the place where his future could never fully unfold. The separation was painful. The injustice was real. Still, the story kept moving through doors Joseph could not have planned for himself. That matters for you. You may be judging your present chapter too early. You may be calling something ruined while God is still using it as movement. You may be naming something rejection while it is actually relocation. And you may be grieving access to a place that could never hold the person you are becoming. This does not mean every painful event has to be romanticized. Pain is still pain. Betrayal is still betrayal. Loss is still loss. But your interpretation matters, because when you decide that every disruption means God has left you, you make it harder to recognize the help already hidden inside the disruption. There is something else you need to understand before we continue. Clarity is not only about what you believe. It is also about the condition of your attention. When your mind has been pulled in too many directions for too long, even a simple inner signal can become harder to notice. That is why some people use quiet routines, breath, prayer, music, or focused sound to reduce mental clutter before they return to reflection. One audio tool called the Genius Song was created around this idea. Its creators describe it as a 7-minute listening experience designed around sound patterns associated with focused gamma activity. This is not a replacement for prayer. It is not a substitute for discernment. It is simply a tool some people choose to use while creating a quieter mental space. If you feel led to explore it, the verified link is placed in the description and pinned comment, where you can review it for yourself. For now, keep your attention on the message. The tool is not the center. The deeper issue is learning what happens when your inner world becomes quiet enough to notice what fear, pressure, and constant input were covering. That is where the next layer of divine help begins to make sense. Joseph did not receive the full explanation while standing in the pit. He had to keep walking through a story that made little sense in the middle. And that is one of the hardest forms of faith. You are asked to remain aligned before you can see how the pieces connect. Most people want understanding first, then they will trust. But many spiritual seasons work in the opposite order. Trust comes first. Understanding catches up later. The delay between those two moments is where your old habits begin arguing for control again. Your mind asks for proof. Your fear asks for guarantees. Your history asks whether this pain is only another disappointment, and your spirit keeps returning to a quieter truth. Do not go back simply because the next step has not explained itself yet. That is the first problem and the first solution. The problem is the closed door. The deeper problem is what you believe the closed door means. The solution is not to force the door. The solution is to stop using access as your only evidence of favor. Sometimes favor looks like entry. Sometimes favor looks like denial. Sometimes favor is the opportunity that appears. Sometimes favor is the opportunity that disappears before it costs you more than you can see. You cannot measure God only by what He allows you to keep. There may be one door in your life that keeps pulling your attention backward. You still imagine what could have happened. You still wonder whether one more conversation would change everything. You still replay the version of the future you created around that door. But if peace consistently leaves when you reach for it, pay attention. If your dignity keeps shrinking every time you try to reopen it, pay attention. If you must become less honest, less peaceful, or less faithful just to remain near it, the cost may already be answering your question. God does not need you to hate the door. He may simply need you to stop standing in front of it. There is a difference. Hatred keeps you emotionally tied to what ended. Release lets you turn around. One still gives the old place power, while the other gives your attention back to the road ahead. But freedom does not require their recognition. Your next chapter does not need an apology from the last one. Closure can begin before anyone admits what they did. And sometimes, the strongest evidence that healing has started is simply that you no longer need to win the argument. The second problem is harder because it feels invisible. It is the silence. You pray and nothing dramatic happens. You ask for direction and no thunder answers. You wait for a sign and the day remains ordinary. Then ordinary begins to feel like absence. Elijah knew something about that. He experienced power in ways few people ever did. He saw dramatic moments. He saw fire. He saw confrontation. Yet when he later needed direction, the lesson did not come through the loudest display. The wind came, but the answer was not there. The earth shook, but the answer was not there. Fire appeared, but the answer was not there. Then came a gentle sound. The lesson was not that God never moves loudly. The lesson was that loudness is not the only evidence of presence. That matters because you have trained yourself to look for emotional intensity. If the moment feels powerful, you trust it. If tears come, you believe something happened. If the sign is dramatic, you call it confirmation. But quiet guidance can be just as important, and sometimes far safer. A peaceful warning may save you more than a dramatic rescue. A simple hesitation may protect you before chaos begins. A repeated thought in prayer may matter more than 100 opinions. But you must become willing to respect what is quiet, or you will keep overlooking the guidance that does not entertain you. This is why silence can become help. Silence removes your dependency on constant external confirmation. It trains you to stay present without demanding immediate emotional reward. It reveals how quickly you run toward noise when uncertainty becomes uncomfortable. At first, silence can feel empty. Then, it starts exposing what was underneath the noise. Fear surfaces. Old assumptions surface. Unfinished grief surfaces. Your need to control the outcome surfaces. And that can make stillness feel harder before it feels healing. Do not confuse exposure with failure. When quiet reveals what is unresolved, the quiet is doing its work. You are finally seeing what constant activity allowed you to avoid. That is not abandonment. It can be the beginning of honest alignment. Some of you have been praying for God to speak while filling every available moment with another voice. The television is on. The phone is in your hand. Messages keep arriving. Music is playing. Someone else is explaining what your life should mean. Then you wonder why your own inner awareness feels faint. You do not need to disappear from the world. You need intentional spaces where the world does not get the first word. 10 quiet minutes can reveal how restless your attention has become. A short walk without input can show you how quickly your mind reaches for distraction. And when that restlessness appears, do not attack yourself. Observe it. The urge to reach for noise is information. It shows you how much stimulation your mind has learned to expect. Awareness is the first step toward reclaiming the attention you have been giving away. The solution to silence is not always more signs. Sometimes the solution is a deeper capacity to remain still. You stop demanding a spectacular answer. You create room. You listen. You notice what returns without force. And slowly, the difference between panic and peace becomes easier to recognize. Panic pushes. Peace can wait. Panic makes everything urgent. Peace can hold tension without collapsing. Panic asks 10 people for permission. Peace may still seek wise counsel, but it does not hand its final authority to the loudest person in the room. You have felt this difference before. Fear arrives with a rush. It multiplies possibilities. It imagines every worst case. It creates pressure to solve the entire future immediately. But a clean inner knowing often feels quieter. It may still challenge you, but it does not scatter you. The third problem is separation. This one touches identity. When people move away, you can begin wondering if something is wrong with you. When relationships change, you may assume you became difficult. When invitations stop, you may secretly fear that growth has made you unwanted. But separation can be one of the clearest forms of preparation. Some relationships are connected to a version of you that no longer exists. They knew how to access the old you. They knew how to predict your reactions. They knew what guilt would make you return. Then you changed. You became slower to answer pressure. You became more careful with access. You stopped offering instant explanations. You stopped rescuing everyone from the consequences of their own choices. And the relationship began revealing what it had been depending on. That can hurt. You thought the bond was built on love. Then your first serious boundary exposed how much of it was built on availability. You thought they respected your heart. Then your first no revealed how much they preferred your obedience. Do not let that discovery harden you. Let it educate you. Bitterness is another form of attachment. It keeps the person living in your thoughts. Wisdom learns the lesson without carrying the poison. You can recognize manipulation and still keep your heart clean. A watchman sees patterns without becoming obsessed with enemies. A spiritual intercessor prays without taking ownership of every crisis. A cycle breaker loves family without repeating every family pattern. Your identity becomes stronger when compassion and boundaries learn to exist together. That balance is important. Some people call every disagreement an attack. That is not discernment. Some people call every boundary rejection. That is not wisdom. You are learning to become precise. You can ask what happened without turning every event into a spiritual emergency. Precision protects peace. It helps you separate what is yours from what belongs to someone else. Their disappointment may be theirs. Their reaction may be theirs. Their opinion may be theirs. Your responsibility is to remain honest, loving, and aligned without allowing another person to control your obedience through emotional pressure. This is the hidden blessing inside separation. Distance can reveal dependency. It can show you where your identity was still tied to being needed. It can reveal how much of your self-worth depended on being the fixer, the peacemaker, the rescuer, or the one who always understood everyone else. God may be helping you by breaking that agreement. You are not valuable because you are useful to everyone. You are not chosen because you can carry every burden. You are not loved because you never disappoint another person. Your worth cannot depend on how much access others have to your energy. That truth will offend the version of you that survived through service. It will feel selfish at first. You will question whether you are becoming cold. But then something changes. You begin serving from choice instead of fear. You begin giving from strength instead of obligation. This is how separation becomes preparation. It creates room for cleaner motives. It gives you space to discover what you actually believe. It removes the audience that trained you to perform. And without constant approval or disapproval around you, your own convictions become easier to identify. Now notice how the three problems connect. The closed door challenges your interpretation of favor. The silence challenges your dependency on dramatic confirmation. The separation challenges your dependency on approval. Three different experiences, but all three are teaching the same deeper lesson. God wants your discernment to become stronger than your attachment, stronger than attachment to one outcome, stronger than attachment to one sign, stronger than attachment to one person. Because when attachment is stronger than discernment, you will keep calling bondage love simply because you are afraid to lose it. This is why the message is beginning to sharpen. You thought the central question was, when will God help me? But the deeper question is, will you recognize His help when it does not look like what you requested? That is where many prayers are answered in forms people initially resist. You ask for peace, and a relationship ends. You ask for direction, and a familiar path closes. You ask for strength, and the people who always rescued you step back. You ask for clarity, and the noise around you becomes unbearable. Then you wonder why everything is changing. What if the change is part of the answer? What if the discomfort is revealing what cannot come with you? What if the closed door is reducing distraction? What if the silence is rebuilding attention? What if the separation is teaching you who you are without constant validation? There is another reason God may allow this process to unfold slowly. Quick answers can produce shallow dependence. You receive the sign, follow it, and move on. But when you learn how to discern through uncertainty, you gain something deeper. You begin developing an inner framework you can carry into future decisions. But if this season teaches you discernment, you will not be impressed by access alone. You will ask better questions. Does this preserve peace? Does this require dishonesty? Does this align with truth? Does this strengthen the person I am becoming? Or does it reward the version of me I am trying to leave? Joseph needed discernment when power finally arrived. Elijah needed discernment when the dramatic signs were not the answer. You will need discernment when your next season begins to open, because the danger is not only missing the right door, the danger is entering the wrong one because you are tired of waiting. That is why this middle season matters. It is training your appetite. It is teaching you to stop choosing merely because something is available. Availability is not assignment. Attention is not love. Intensity is not truth. Familiarity is not safety. And delay is not always denial. You are learning to ask a different question. Not, can I make this work? But, should I carry this forward? Not, do they want me? But, does this relationship honor truth? Not, is the door open? But, what does entering this door require me to become? This is where the chosen one identity becomes practical. It is not a title for feeling superior. It is a responsibility to become more honest with what you know. If you call yourself chosen but repeatedly abandon discernment to keep people comfortable, the label becomes empty. A watchman stays awake to patterns. A cycle breaker refuses to repeat what damaged the generations before. An intercessor carries compassion without becoming captive to every crisis. These identities are not decorations. They demand a different way of responding to pressure. That different response begins with pause. Before you answer, pause. Before you return, pause. Before you reopen the door, pause. Before you explain yourself for the 10th time, pause. The pause gives truth a chance to speak before habit takes control. In that pause, ask what you are afraid will happen if you obey what you already sense. Are you afraid someone will leave? Are you afraid they will misunderstand you? Are you afraid the opportunity will not return? Are you afraid choosing peace will make you look selfish? Name the fear. Do not let it hide inside spiritual language. A fear that remains unnamed can pretend to be wisdom for years. Once you see it clearly, you can examine whether it deserves to direct your life. But your season is changing. You are being invited out of that shelter, not into recklessness, into maturity. You can make a careful decision without possessing complete certainty. You can remain humble and still trust what has become consistently clear. And that is why your inner clarity matters so much. The clearer you become, the less easily pressure can rewrite what you know. You can listen to advice without becoming owned by it. You can receive correction without collapsing. You can change your mind without feeling ashamed. By now, you may already see one area where help has been arriving in disguise. Maybe it was the door that closed. Maybe it was the person who stepped away. Maybe it was the season of silence that forced you to meet parts of yourself you had been avoiding. It requires refusing to let pain have the final interpretation. Joseph did not call betrayal good. He recognized that God could still work through what others meant for harm. That distinction matters. It keeps your faith strong without forcing you to deny what happened. You can tell the truth and still expect restoration. You can acknowledge loss and still believe in redirection. You can admit that silence was difficult and still discover what it taught you. Spiritual maturity does not erase complexity. It teaches you how to carry truth without losing hope. And now another question is opening. If divine help can arrive through closed doors, silence, and separation, how do you know when you are truly being redirected and when fear is simply making you withdraw? That question cannot be answered by emotion alone. This is where the next layer becomes essential. You need to understand why your inner signal can become quieter after years of pressure, overstimulation, disappointment, and constant decision-making. You need to understand what happens when the mind becomes so crowded that subtle guidance is harder to recognize. Because the goal is not to become suspicious of everything. The goal is clarity. The goal is not to cut everyone off. The goal is wise access. The goal is not to wait for mystical certainty. The goal is to become steady enough to recognize truth without forcing it. The next part will show you why Samuel had to learn the difference between a familiar voice and a divine one. It will also reveal why your ability to notice patterns can become stronger again when attention is protected, and one hidden blocker will begin to surface. Do not miss that blocker. It is not simply noise. It is not simply fear. It is a habit many strong people learned in difficult seasons, and it can make you override the first clean signal, even after you have already recognized it. Once you see it, several decisions from your past may suddenly make sense. Chosen one. Now we arrive at the question beneath all the others. If God can guide through silence, closed doors, and separation, why does your inner knowing sometimes feel weaker than it once did? Why can you sense something clearly for one moment, then doubt it the next? The answer begins with learning how recognition is formed. Samuel learned this in a quiet place. He heard a voice calling his name, but he did not immediately understand where it came from. He ran toward the familiar source. He assumed the sound belonged to someone he already knew. Again, the call came. Again, he misunderstood it. That detail matters. Samuel was not rebellious. He was not careless. He simply had not yet learned how to recognize the voice he was hearing. The signal was present before his interpretation was accurate. Recognition had to be trained through attention, repetition, humility, and guidance. You may be in a similar season. The problem is not always that guidance is absent. Sometimes the problem is that familiar voices are still receiving automatic authority. Your history speaks. Your fear speaks. Your family expectations speak. Your old survival patterns speak. Then one quieter knowing appears, and you do not yet know how much weight to give it. Samuel did not become a watchman in one instant. He learned to listen differently. He stopped assuming every call belonged to the familiar source. He became available to what was actually being said. That is the beginning of discernment. You stop asking only whether you heard something, and you begin asking what kind of voice produced it. Fear has a voice. It is usually urgent. It wants immediate relief. It tells you that uncertainty is dangerous. It pressures you to choose whatever ends the discomfort fastest. Even when fear sounds intelligent, it often leaves your inner world more scattered than before. Old wounds also speak. They tell you that this person will abandon you because someone else did. They tell you that this opportunity will disappear because another one disappeared. They turn present moments into rehearsals of old pain. Then you react to the memory while believing you are reacting to the present. But a clean instruction often feels different. It can be firm without being frantic. It can challenge you without humiliating you. It can require courage without filling your mind with chaos. You may not like what it asks, but something beneath the discomfort remains strangely steady. That steadiness matters. The watchman learns to notice what remains after emotion settles. The watchman does not worship the first feeling. The watchman observes patterns over time. What keeps returning in prayer? What becomes clearer in quiet? What consistently produces integrity even when the choice costs something? That is growth. You are becoming less hypnotized by presentation. You are watching fruit. You are noticing consistency. You are learning that a beautiful explanation cannot replace a trustworthy pattern, and this is preparing you for a stronger kind of discernment than the one you had before. There is a reason the old version of clarity felt easier. When you were younger, many decisions were simpler. Your world contained fewer responsibilities. Your attention was divided across fewer demands. Curiosity could remain on one thing longer. Imagination had more room to breathe. Then life became louder. Responsibilities multiplied. Notifications multiplied. Expectations multiplied. Every day began asking you to switch attention again and again. You learned to move quickly between problems, conversations, tasks, and decisions. That ability helped you function, but constant switching also trained your mind to expect interruption. Now sit with that for a moment. A mind trained for interruption can begin interrupting itself. Even when the room is quiet, thoughts jump. You begin one prayer and remember an unfinished task. You read a few lines and reach for the phone. You try to reflect, but your attention starts looking for the next piece of stimulation. This does not mean something is wrong with you. It means attention follows practice. What you repeatedly train becomes easier to repeat. If you practice constant switching all day, deep focus can feel unfamiliar at night. If you practice immediate reaction, stillness can initially feel uncomfortable. That is why restoring clarity is not only about asking for another sign. It is also about protecting the conditions in which you can actually notice what is already present. You cannot listen carefully while giving every interruption equal access. You cannot observe subtle patterns while rushing from one emotional alarm to another. The watchman must learn stillness, not passive stillness, alert stillness. There is a difference. Passive stillness checks out. Alert stillness becomes more present. It notices without chasing. It listens without inventing. It allows a thought to remain long enough to see whether it carries truth or only urgency. Samuel had to become available to the voice instead of immediately running toward the familiar interpretation. You are learning the same discipline. Before you call someone, pause. Before you assume the worst, pause. Before you accept an invitation, pause. Before you send the message written from anger, pause. The pause creates space between signal and reaction. Inside that space, identity can choose. The old version of you reacted to protect itself. The developing watchman responds to preserve truth. One is controlled by pressure. The other can feel pressure without surrendering authority to it. This is where many chosen ones misunderstand sensitivity. Sensitivity is not the same as discernment. Sensitivity notices more. Discernment understands what deserves meaning. Without discernment, sensitivity can become exhausting because every mood, every look, every silence, and every change begins feeling important. This matters because chronic inner alarm makes every signal feel equally urgent. When everything feels important, nothing receives careful attention. You start responding to volume instead of truth. The loudest thought wins. The strongest emotion wins. The most demanding person wins. But that pattern can change. Attention can be trained. Focus can be protected. The inner room can become quieter. And as the noise falls, you begin noticing something surprising. The guidance did not always disappear. Your ability to remain with it had become weaker. This is where a simple brain-based idea can help you understand the pattern without replacing the spiritual meaning. The brain moves through different patterns of electrical activity. Researchers use names for ranges of these patterns, including gamma activity, which is often discussed in connection with attention, learning, memory integration, and moments of intense mental processing. Do not turn that into a magic formula. A brainwave label does not explain your calling. It does not prove a spiritual message. It simply gives us another language for understanding why focused attention can feel different from scattered attention, and why certain practices are designed around helping the mind settle into more coherent patterns. The creators of focused sound tools often build around this principle. They use repeated tones, rhythmic structures, or carefully designed audio patterns to support a listening environment associated with concentration. The claim is not that sound can make decisions for you. The useful idea is much simpler. A quieter, more focused mind can give subtle information more room to be noticed. That is why the earlier question mattered. What if some of the confusion you have called spiritual distance has been intensified by constant mental noise? What if part of your restoration involves learning how to stay with one clean thought long enough to understand it, instead of abandoning it the moment another voice appears? You have probably experienced a version of this already. A solution appears while you are walking alone. A clear thought comes in the shower. A difficult decision becomes simpler after you sleep. An idea arrives while you are praying without your phone nearby. The answer did not necessarily appear because the universe suddenly changed. The noise changed. When noise decreases, patterns can become easier to see. You notice what has repeated. You remember what you dismissed. You connect a conversation from last month with a feeling you had yesterday. Pieces that seemed unrelated begin forming one picture. This is why attention is sacred territory. What you repeatedly allow into it shapes what remains available when you need wisdom. If you fill every quiet space with other people's opinions, you may struggle to hear your own honest response. If you fill every uncertain moment with entertainment, you may never discover what the uncertainty was trying to reveal. Protecting attention is not isolation, it is stewardship. You still listen to wise people, you still learn, you still receive correction, but you stop allowing unlimited voices to live inside decisions that belong between you, truth, and the responsibilities God has actually given you. Do not waste that change, use it. Create small spaces where your attention is not rented out. Sit without reaching for another voice. Walk without filling every second. Pray without turning prayer into a performance. Read slowly enough for one sentence to remain with you. The goal is not to become impressive at stillness, The goal is recognition. Samuel needed recognition. You need recognition. When the right signal comes, you want enough inner quiet to notice its character before old reflexes rename it. Here is a practical distinction. Fear often asks, what if everything goes wrong? Discernment asks, what is true right now? Fear tries to solve 10 future problems. Discernment identifies the next faithful response. Fear multiplies possibilities. Discernment reduces the decision to what is actually yours to do. This is where the breakthrough prophet identity becomes real. You are not powerful because you predict everything. You become trustworthy because you obey what is clear. You stop using spiritual language to avoid ordinary responsibility. You stop waiting for a spectacular sign to do the next honest thing. A true watchman does not chase mystery for entertainment. The watchman protects what matters. The watchman notices when attention is leaking. The watchman knows when emotional pressure is distorting perception. The watchman learns which battles belong to the assignment and which battles are simply invitations to distraction. This is not pretending fear does not exist. It is refusing to make fear your prophet. Fear is allowed to speak, but it does not get the final decision. That belongs to truth, wisdom, prayer, and the character you are choosing to build. If this message is helping you recognize someone else who has been living under too much noise, share it with that person. Do not send it to prove a point. Send it as a gift. Someone may have been asking why clarity feels so distant, and this could help them create enough space to hear themselves again. And if you have been watching quietly, give this message your attention all the way through. The most important part is still ahead. We have identified the closed door, the silence, the separation, and the scattered attention. But there is one deeper habit that can override clarity, even when clarity has already arrived. But truth can create tension when it challenges an old identity. Saying no can feel uncomfortable when you were trained to please. Rest can feel uncomfortable when your worth was tied to productivity. Leaving can feel uncomfortable when loyalty was defined as endless endurance. So discomfort alone cannot be your compass. You must ask what kind of discomfort you are feeling. Is it the discomfort of violating your values, or the discomfort of finally honoring them? Those experiences can feel similar at first, but they lead in opposite directions. This is why discernment becomes more mature over time. You stop asking only, does this feel good? You start asking, does this make me more honest? Does this protect what matters? Does this align with the person I am becoming? Does this decision remain clean after the emotion settles? That final question is powerful. Let the emotion settle, then look again. Excitement can make a bad option look perfect. Fear can make a good option look impossible. Anger can make revenge look like justice. Loneliness can make old access look like love. Wait until the wave lowers, then observe what remains. You may discover that the answer was underneath the emotion the entire time. It did not need to become louder. You needed the wave to become quieter. Time reveals, silence reveals, boundaries reveal. This season has used all three. And now you are beginning to understand why what felt like delay may have actually been training. You asked for help. God began strengthening your ability to recognize what helps and what harms. You asked for direction. God began removing the voices that made every direction confusing. You asked for a new chapter. God began exposing the habits that would have carried old chaos into the new one. That is the false summit. You may think the answer is simply to protect your attention, become quiet, and trust the first peaceful signal. Those things matter. They will help, but they are not yet the deepest issue, because some of you already receive a clean signal. You recognize it. You feel the steadiness. You know what the next honest step is. Then something happens after recognition. You begin dismantling the answer you just received. You ask someone else. They sound uncertain, so you become uncertain. You imagine how your family will react. Suddenly, the decision feels dangerous. You remember an old failure. Now the clean signal feels naive. You search for more information until every option looks equally complicated. That is the hidden blocker beginning to surface. It is not lack of discernment. It is what happens after discernment. You recognize the signal, then you override it, because another part of you has been trained to distrust your own clear perception. Strong people often develop this habit in difficult environments. They learn to read everyone else before they read themselves. They learn that safety comes from predicting reactions. They learn to adjust quickly. They become excellent at sensing the room, but weak at honoring the first truth they sensed inside it. That skill may have protected you once. If you grew up around unpredictable moods, you learned to scan faces. If approval felt uncertain, you learned to adjust. If conflict carried a high cost, you learned to anticipate what everyone needed before they asked. You became useful. You became responsible. People called you mature, and perhaps you were. But beneath that strength, another lesson may have formed. Your own inner signal became less important than the reaction of the people around you. That lesson does not disappear automatically when the environment changes. You can become an adult, leave the old room, build a new life, and still carry the old rule. Before I trust myself, I must know everyone else is comfortable. There it is. The pattern behind so many delayed decisions. You know what you need, then you imagine their disappointment. You know what boundary is necessary, then you picture their anger. You know the relationship is draining you, then you remember how lonely leaving might feel. So you return to confusion, not because the signal vanished, but because external reaction became louder than internal clarity. That is why you keep asking for another sign. You are hoping God will make the answer so dramatic that you will not have to take responsibility for choosing it. But spiritual maturity does not remove responsibility. It strengthens it. You still choose, you still act, you still face consequences. Guidance is not an escape from adulthood. It is support for becoming more honest inside it. This is where courage enters. Discernment can tell you the door is wrong. Courage is what lets you stop knocking. Discernment can tell you the boundary is necessary. Courage is what lets you hold it when someone is disappointed. Discernment can reveal that your pace is unsustainable. Courage is what lets you disappoint the version of yourself that believed rest had to be earned. One sees, the other obeys. You need both. That is why the hidden blocker is so powerful. It sits between seeing and obeying. You receive clarity, but then you negotiate with it. You ask fear to approve it. You ask old wounds to approve it. You ask people who benefit from your confusion to approve it. Chosen one. This is where the next part will confront you with love. You cannot keep asking heaven for guidance while giving every outside voice the power to veto what becomes clear. At some point, the question is no longer whether you heard. The question becomes whether you will honor what you heard. Teachability listens and evaluates. Self-abandonment automatically assumes everyone else knows better. Teachability allows truth to correct you. Self-abandonment allows pressure to control you. One strengthens discernment, the other dissolves it. You are being trained out of self-abandonment. That is why certain conversations now feel unbearable. That is why repeated explanations exhaust you. That is why your body seems to resist some situations before your mind can explain why. You have spent too long overriding signals to maintain peace around you. Now peace inside you is becoming important too. Not selfish peace, not avoidance, clean peace. The peace that comes when your choices and your values stop fighting each other. This is the point where your identity shifts again. You are not only the person who notices, you become the person who honors what is noticed. You are not only sensitive, you become discerning. You are not only a helper, you become an intercessor who understands that compassion does not require self-betrayal. And you are not only breaking one personal habit, you may be breaking a generational pattern. Perhaps people before you survived by silence. Perhaps they stayed in damaging situations because leaving felt dishonorable. Perhaps they confused endurance with love and self-erasure with loyalty. You can respect what they survived without repeating every strategy they used to survive it. That is the work of a cycle breaker. You receive the wisdom, honor the sacrifice, and still refuse to pass unnecessary fear into the next generation. Imagine what changes when that pattern ends with you. The people after you learn that boundaries can coexist with love. They learn that rest is not laziness. They learn that truth does not require endless explanation. They learn that wise decisions can survive another person's disappointment. That is legacy, not only money, not only achievement. Legacy is also the emotional and spiritual permission you leave behind. It is the atmosphere your choices create for people who come after you. But before legacy comes alignment, and before alignment comes the confrontation we are approaching now. You have to see exactly where you have been giving your authority away, not to condemn yourself, to reclaim responsibility. Think of the decision that has followed you through this message. Do not solve it yet, just observe it. What was your first clean knowing before everyone else entered the conversation? What did you sense before fear began creating 10 future problems? What changed afterward? Did someone question you? Did guilt appear? Did an old memory return? Did you start researching endlessly? Did you tell yourself that one more sign would make the decision safe? That sequence is important. The next part will examine it closely, because the message God wants you to hear today is not simply that help is coming. The deeper revelation is that help may already be reaching you, while an old survival pattern keeps teaching you to mistrust the form it takes. And once you see that pattern clearly, the entire season begins to look different. The closed door becomes information, the silence becomes training, the separation becomes space, the quiet signal becomes easier to respect. The next question is whether you will stop overriding it. That is where the confrontation begins. That is where the message becomes personal. And that is where what felt like confusion can finally turn into a decision. Chosen one. This is the moment the message becomes personal. Up to now, you have been learning how help can arrive through closed doors, silence, separation, and a quieter mind. But none of that matters if you keep receiving clarity and then handing it back to fear. You already know the pattern. A clean thought comes. It feels steady. You know what the next honest step is. Then another voice enters. You imagine who might disagree. You remember what happened last time. You begin explaining the decision before anyone even asks. That is the place where clarity gets buried. Not because God failed to speak, not because you lacked sensitivity. The problem begins after recognition, when an old survival habit tells you that your inner knowing is not safe until someone else approves it. Chosen one, hear this carefully. You were never meant to build your life around constant permission. Wise counsel matters, humility matters, correction matters, but there is a difference between receiving counsel and surrendering your responsibility to every opinion around you. Some of you have been waiting for God to make a decision for you so completely that courage will no longer be required. You want the path to become undeniable. You want every person to agree. You want every risk removed. But that is not how mature discernment usually works. Sometimes God gives enough light for one faithful step. Then He watches what you do with that light. Not because He is cruel, not because He wants you confused. Because trust becomes real when you stop demanding that certainty remove the need for courage. This is where the hidden blocker is finally exposed. You have been overriding the first clean signal. You feel the warning, then negotiate with it. You sense the boundary, then soften it. You know what needs to end, then reopen the conversation because someone else became uncomfortable. You feel the pull to begin, then delay until the energy disappears. You sense that you need rest, then call yourself lazy. You know a relationship has become unhealthy, Then tell yourself loyalty means staying available. You recognize the cost, then keep paying it, because changing the pattern feels unfamiliar. This is why you have felt spiritually tired. You are not only carrying decisions, you are carrying the burden of repeatedly reopening decisions that were already becoming clear. Every reopening creates another argument. Every argument creates another possibility. Every possibility gives fear another seat at the table. There comes a moment when discernment must become obedience, not impulsiveness, not stubbornness. Obedience. You listen, you test, you observe the fruit, you remain humble. Then when the truth continues to stand, you stop demanding that it prove itself forever. Samuel eventually learned how to answer the call. He did not spend the rest of his life running back to Eli every time he heard something difficult. The training had a purpose. Recognition had to mature into responsibility. That is your invitation now. Become responsible for what you consistently recognize. If the same boundary keeps returning in peace, examine it seriously. If the same warning appears every time the noise settles, stop dismissing it because it is inconvenient. If the same direction keeps returning without panic, give it weight. If a relationship only feels safe when you silence your values, notice that. If an opportunity requires you to betray what you have prayed to become, do not call the opportunity a blessing simply because it is impressive. This is the confrontation. You cannot ask for a new life while protecting every pattern that belongs to the old one. You cannot ask for clearer guidance while giving every outside voice equal authority. You cannot ask for peace while repeatedly walking back into what destroys it. You cannot keep calling yourself a watchman while ignoring the patterns you have already seen. You cannot call yourself a cycle breaker while making the same decision only because the family before you made it. You cannot call yourself an intercessor while confusing compassion with self-abandonment. Identity has consequences. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what you return to. It changes how long you remain in conversations that require you to betray yourself. It changes whether you call fear wisdom just because fear sounds careful. And now the message from God becomes clear. You have been asking when help will arrive, but help may already be here. It may be the thing you resisted. It may be the door that would not reopen. It may be the person whose distance finally gave you room to hear yourself. It may be the exhaustion that made noise unbearable. It may be the repeated inner warning you kept dismissing. It may be the desire to become quiet. It may be the sudden inability to pretend that what hurts you is harmless. The message is this: stop waiting for help to look only like rescue after disaster. Learn to recognize help while it is preventing the disaster. Learn to honor the quiet signal before chaos becomes proof. Learn to respect the boundary before betrayal forces it. You have been waiting for a dramatic intervention, but some of the greatest interventions are invisible at first. A meeting gets cancelled. A person reveals their character early. An opportunity slows down. A plan refuses to move. A strange uneasiness makes you look closer. Then months later, you understand what you were protected from. You see what would have happened if the door had opened. You understand why the delay mattered. You finally realize that the answer arrived before you had language for it. Chosen one. God wants to help you before the breaking point. That is why discernment matters. It lets you respond while the warning is still quiet. It lets you leave before you are destroyed. It lets you rest before your mind becomes completely scattered. It lets you say no before resentment grows. It lets you make room before opportunity arrives. It lets you release what has already ended before the next thing is forced to compete with the old one. This is the life-changing turn. You are not being trained to predict every future event. You are being trained to become faithful with the next clean instruction. That is enough. You do not need the entire map to honor one clear step. The first clean instruction may be simple. Stop calling them. Send the application. Finish the work. Rest tonight. Tell the truth. Leave the argument alone. Protect your morning. Forgive without reopening access. Begin what you keep postponing. Simple does not mean insignificant. Small obedience can redirect years. One boundary can change a family pattern. One honest decision can end a cycle that survived because everyone before you was too afraid to name it. So bring one decision into your mind right now. Do not bring 10. Choose one. The one that keeps returning. The one that becomes clear in quiet and complicated in company. The one you have discussed enough but still have not honored. Ask yourself what your first clean knowing was. Not the loudest feeling, not the most convenient answer. The first clear knowing that remained after emotion settled. What was it? Now ask what happened next. Did fear challenge it? Did guilt challenge it? Did someone else's reaction challenge it? Did an old memory challenge it? Did your need to be understood challenge it? There is your pattern. That is the doorway between confusion and clarity. The signal arrived. Then the veto arrived. You have been giving the veto more authority than the signal. That changes now. You do not have to obey every thought. You do not have to treat every feeling as revelation. But when truth has been tested, repeated, and strengthened in peace, you can stop placing it on trial simply because obedience has a cost. This is where courage and clarity finally meet. Courage says, I can act without controlling every outcome. Clarity says, I know enough for the next step. Together, they break the cycle that fear used to keep you suspended between insight and action. And there is something practical that can support this shift. You have already heard me mention the connection between quiet attention and the ability to notice subtle patterns. That is where the tool I mentioned earlier becomes relevant again. The Genius song is built around a 7-minute listening experience. Its creators describe the audio as using carefully structured sound patterns associated with gamma activity, with the goal of helping listeners enter a more focused and mentally organized state. The important point is not that an audio can tell you what God is saying. It cannot make your spiritual decisions for you. It cannot replace prayer, wisdom, scripture, or honest reflection. The value its creators describe is much narrower. It is designed to support a focused mental environment where scattered attention may settle. That matters because one of the biggest obstacles we have been discussing is not lack of intelligence. It is fragmentation. You begin with one thought, then jump to another. You know what matters, but your attention keeps being pulled into noise. The people behind the program connect that pattern to gamma activity. Their material describes gamma as a brainwave range associated with focused processing, learning, integration, and moments when information feels connected instead of scattered. They also describe what they call a decline effect. The idea in their material is that many people remember feeling more curious, imaginative, and mentally flexible when they were younger, then gradually lose some of that sense of easy mental connection as life becomes more demanding. Again, this is the product's framework. It is not a spiritual diagnosis. It does not mean every person experiences the same thing. But the idea fits the practical problem we have been discussing. A noisy mind can make subtle insight harder to hold. The story behind the audio centers on Dr. Robert Lake. According to the product material, he spent 34 years studying the relationship between sound, attention, and brainwave activity, while drawing on research associated with institutions such as MIT, Princeton, Harvard, and other leading centers. The program then uses a short daily listening routine. You put on headphones, you close your eyes, you listen for 7 minutes. That simplicity is part of the appeal. There is no complicated training sequence to memorize before you begin. The creators say the purpose is to support a mental state connected with clearer focus and stronger access to the kind of pattern recognition many people feel they once had more naturally. That is why this tool fits here rather than at the beginning of the message. You did not need another object to depend on. You needed to understand the problem first. You needed to see that the deeper work is still yours. Protect attention. Reduce needless noise. Stop overriding tested clarity. Then a tool can support the environment without becoming the authority. There is another reason I wanted to explain it this way. Some people hear a product name and immediately imagine a complicated system, a long course, or another thing they will fail to finish. This is not presented that way. The core practice is 7 minutes. Others hear brainwave language and assume they need to understand technical research before they can use it. The product does not require that. Its instructions are simple. Headphones, eyes closed, 7 minutes, then return to your day. The creators also report that more than 18,366 people have used the program, with under 4% requesting a refund. That means their own reported figures indicate that more than 96% kept it. Those numbers come from the product material. They do not promise the same experience for every person. Your results can be personal and subjective. The point is that the program has already been used by a large group, and the refund structure gives people room to decide whether it belongs in their routine. Now, there is something important about the price. The listed value in the material is $49. The offer presented through the verified page is $39 for viewers who choose to try it. But the price is not the main protection. The stronger part is the guarantee. The product comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, according to the offer details. That gives you time to use it consistently and decide from experience rather than pressure. The offer also includes 4 digital bonuses. Genius Child is listed at $19. Classic Book is listed at $20. Guided Visualization is listed at $29. The 5-habit infographic is listed at $12. Together, those bonuses are listed at $80 in value, and according to the product terms provided, you keep all 4 bonuses even if you later use the 90-day refund option. That matters because the decision should not come from fear. It should come from fit. If you are curious about whether a 7-minute focused listening routine could support the quieter mental environment we have been discussing, you can examine the details for yourself. There is one caution: use only the verified link connected with this message. The product material specifically warns against searching for copies on places like Amazon, YouTube, or Spotify, because those versions may not be the verified program. That warning is not meant to create panic. It is simply about knowing what you are evaluating. If you choose to explore it, go through the verified link in the description or pinned comment so you can see the actual offer, guarantee, instructions, and bonuses in one place. Now, I want you to do something before you decide anything. Pause for 3 seconds. Put one hand over your heart or rest it on the table in front of you. Then ask yourself one question. Am I looking for another thing to rescue me, or am I choosing a simple tool that could support the clarity I am already taking responsibility for? Pause for 2 seconds. Let the answer be honest. If the answer is that you are ready to support your focus while continuing the deeper work, you can explore the Genius Song through the verified link in the description or pinned comment. Read the page. Look at the guarantee. Decide without pressure. And if it is not for you, keep the message. The central truth does not depend on a purchase. You can still protect your attention. You can still create quiet. You can still stop reopening every decision fear wants to challenge. But if you do choose it, use it as support, not as a substitute for your own responsibility. 7 minutes of audio cannot replace an honest life. It cannot make a boundary for you. It cannot tell you who to trust. What it can do, according to its creators, is support a focused listening environment built around the gamma-based approach they designed. Then you return to prayer, reflection, work, and decision-making with the responsibility still in your hands. This is why the offer belongs at this point in the message. We have already identified the real battle. The battle is not simply outside you. It is the moment after clarity arrives, when fear tries to pull you back into endless checking and external approval. You do not need another dependency. You need support for the person you are becoming. A watchman needs attention. An intercessor needs boundaries. A cycle breaker needs enough clarity to recognize inherited patterns before repeating them. And now the message returns fully to you. Do not let the tool become another distraction. Close the tab if you need to. Finish hearing this first. There is still one sacred movement left, because recognition and action are not the end of transformation. You also need closure. You need to stop carrying the old chapter emotionally after you have already left it practically. You need to release the need to be understood by everyone who benefited from the former version of you. That release may feel like grief. You are saying goodbye to roles that once gave you identity. The fixer, the rescuer, the endless explainer, the person who could be counted on to absorb everyone's discomfort. You may miss the feeling of being needed. That does not mean you should return. Familiarity can feel like belonging even when it was exhausting you. The nervous system can recognize a pattern as familiar without that pattern being healthy. So do not confuse familiar with faithful. You are learning a different way to live. Fewer explanations, cleaner boundaries, more intentional attention, more time before reaction, more respect for the first clear signal after it has been tested. This will change how people experience you. Some will call you different. They will be right. Some will say you are distant. They may be reacting to the access they no longer have. Some will respect the change immediately. Others will need time. Your job is not to control every interpretation. Your job is to remain honest. If a boundary needs correction, correct it. If your tone becomes hard, soften it. If you make a mistake, admit it. But do not abandon a necessary change simply because someone dislikes losing influence. That is holy conviction. It is not arrogance. It is not spiritual pride. It is the quiet strength to remain aligned without needing to make another person wrong. You can say, "This is what I need," without saying, "You are evil." You can say, "I cannot continue this pattern," without rewriting the entire past. You can move forward without turning every separation into a battle. That is the kind of strength God is forming in you. Strength with peace, boundaries without hatred, discernment without paranoia, faith without pretending that every difficult feeling is a supernatural sign. And when you live that way, the old blocker weakens. External reactions stop deciding whether your inner truth is valid. You can hear someone disagree and remain thoughtful. You can receive advice without collapsing into confusion. You can even change your decision if new truth appears. That is not weakness. Mature discernment is not rigid. It stays humble enough to update while remaining strong enough not to be manipulated. Chosen one, this is the message. God wants to help you, but help is not always a dramatic rescue from outside. Sometimes help is the strengthening of your ability to recognize what is true before you enter the wrong room. Sometimes help is the courage to obey what you already know. Sometimes help is the closing of a door you were too attached to close yourself. Sometimes help is silence long enough for the noise to reveal how much power it had over you. Sometimes help is the return of attention. Sometimes it is a new boundary. Sometimes it is a quiet no. Sometimes it is the willingness to begin before everyone understands. You have spent enough time waiting for permission from people who cannot see what God is doing inside you. You have spent enough time demanding one more sign after the pattern was already clear. Do not become reckless. Become responsible. Test what you sense. Look at the fruit. Stay teachable. Pray. Reflect. Then stop placing tested clarity back on trial, because fear asks another question. That is the shift. Confusion loses power when you stop rewarding it with endless attention. Fear loses power when it no longer receives automatic authority. Old wounds lose power when they are allowed to inform you without controlling you. The door ahead may still require courage. The conversation may still be difficult. The new routine may still feel unfamiliar, but unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Sometimes unfamiliar is simply what freedom feels like before it becomes normal. In the final part, we will seal this message. We will move from recognition into release. We will let the old chapter close without dragging bitterness into the next one. We will speak over your identity, your future, and the legacy that begins when one person decides the cycle ends here. And before this message closes, you will have a moment to pray over the decision you brought into your mind. Not for 10 signs, not for a perfect map, for enough wisdom, courage, and peace to honor the next faithful step. You are not being abandoned in the middle. You are being taught how to walk without needing every mile explained in advance. The help is already closer than you thought. Now protect what became clear. Do not rush back into noise. Do not immediately ask everyone what they think. Let truth remain with you long enough to become stronger than the fear that has always tried to edit it. Chosen one, you have reached the place where understanding must become release. You have seen the pattern. You have recognized the closed doors, the silence, the separation, and the inner signals you kept placing back on trial. Now the question is no longer whether this season carried a message. The question is what you will carry forward from it. You do not need to leave this moment with every answer. You do not need a perfect plan for the next year. You need one clear decision about who you will be when fear returns tomorrow. Because revelation feels powerful in a quiet moment, but transformation happens when the old pattern knocks again and you respond differently. That is where your new chapter begins. Not when every circumstance changes. Not when everyone finally understands you. Not when the door suddenly opens. It begins when you stop abandoning yourself to preserve what God has already shown you cannot carry anymore. There are things you have outgrown emotionally before you have outgrown them physically. You may still live near the same people. You may still work in the same place. You may still wake up inside the same responsibilities. Yet something fundamental has changed inside you. You can no longer pretend not to see what you see. You can no longer make every warning disappear by explaining it away. You can no longer force yourself to call chaos normal, simply because chaos is familiar. That awareness is not a punishment. It is the beginning of freedom. Freedom often begins quietly. Nobody claps. Nobody announces that the cycle ended. You simply make one different choice. You refuse the old argument. You protect the morning. You stop reopening the door. You speak the truth without making a speech. Then another choice comes. You respond differently again. Slowly, the old pattern stops feeling like your identity. What once controlled your reactions becomes something you can observe from a distance. You realize that you are not required to become the person you once needed to be for survival. This is detachment. You are not detaching from love. You are detaching from the belief that love requires self-abandonment. You are not detaching from responsibility. You are detaching from responsibilities God never assigned to you. You are detaching from the need to rescue every person who refuses to change. You are detaching from conversations that only exist because someone wants another opportunity to cross the same boundary. You are detaching from the belief that being misunderstood automatically means you have done something wrong. Detachment can feel uncomfortable because attachment created routines. You knew what to expect. You knew your role. Even painful patterns can feel strangely safe when they are predictable. But predictability is not the same as peace. Sometimes you stayed because you knew how to survive there. You knew how to read the room. You knew when to stay quiet. You knew how much of yourself to hide. You knew which truth would create conflict and which smile would make everyone comfortable. But chosen one, survival is not the final assignment. There comes a time when the skills that helped you endure must make room for the skills that help you live. You do not have to remain in emotional battle mode simply because battle once taught you how to stay standing. The watchman is not meant to stare at danger forever. The watchman also recognizes when morning has arrived. You have watched enough patterns to know what they produce. You do not need another 10 years of evidence from the same cycle. There is wisdom in knowing when observation is complete. At some point, more analysis becomes another form of delay. You already know how the conversation ends. You already know what happens after you violate your own boundary. You already know how you feel when you keep choosing approval over truth. So let the lesson be complete. You do not need to hate anyone to learn it. You do not need to rewrite every memory. You simply need to stop volunteering for the same wound after the message has already been understood. That brings you into clearing. Clearing is what happens when you stop filling newly created space with the same old noise. It is not enough to remove one draining relationship if you immediately replace it with another. It is not enough to stop one habit if the emptiness sends you back to a different form of distraction. You must protect the empty space long enough for something healthier to grow there. At first, empty space can feel lonely. Your phone may become quieter. Your weekends may feel different. Some conversations may disappear. The silence can tempt you to return simply because silence feels unfamiliar. Do not confuse emptiness with absence. Sometimes, empty space is evidence that unnecessary weight has finally been removed. A room looks empty before it is ready for something new. A field looks bare before another season grows from it. You have been asking for new things while carrying old things with both hands. God may have been making room before giving you more. And if that is true for your season, then clearing is not a setback. It is capacity being restored. Clear the unnecessary explanation. Clear the constant checking. Clear the habit of reading messages 10 times, looking for hidden rejection. Clear the need to know what everyone thinks about you. Clear the belief that every silence requires you to chase someone. You do not need to become indifferent. You need to become centered. There is a difference. Indifference says nothing matters. Centeredness says many things matter, but not everything deserves control over my inner world. That is the maturity developing in you now. You can care without becoming consumed. You can listen without absorbing everything. You can serve without losing yourself. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that love does not authorize unlimited access. As clearing continues, you may notice something unexpected. Your energy begins returning. Ideas that felt distant begin appearing again. Tasks that seemed overwhelming become simpler. You start waking with more intention because less of your attention is being spent rehearsing conversations that never needed another round. This does not mean life suddenly becomes effortless. It means your strength is no longer being divided across 10 invisible battles. You stop spending tomorrow solving yesterday. You stop using today's attention to defend yourself against imagined conversations. That recovered attention becomes available for creation. It becomes available for prayer. It becomes available for your work, your family, your calling, and the decisions that actually deserve your energy. This is where accelerated fulfillment begins. Do not misunderstand that phrase. Accelerated fulfillment does not mean every promise appears overnight. It means you stop creating unnecessary resistance against the direction you already know is right. Progress can feel faster when you are no longer walking forward and backward at the same time. Think about how much energy indecision consumed. You made a choice, then questioned it. You set a boundary, then apologized for it. You released something, then checked whether it missed you. You started moving forward, then turned around to see who was watching. That divided movement is exhausting. But when your inner yes becomes yes, and your inner no becomes no, energy begins traveling in one direction. You still move carefully. You still remain teachable. But you stop allowing fear to reset the process every morning. That can change more than you expect. The project you delayed can finally receive consistent attention. The conversation you avoided can finally happen. The habit you wanted can finally have room. The prayer that once felt desperate can become quieter and more grounded. You begin praying differently. Instead of asking God to control every person around you, you ask for wisdom about your own response. Instead of asking Him to reopen every door, you ask for courage to honor the doors that remain closed. Instead of begging for endless confirmation, you ask for enough humility to recognize correction and enough courage to follow tested clarity. That prayer changes your posture. You stop approaching life as someone waiting to be rescued from every decision. You begin walking as a spiritual warrior who understands that strength is not loudness. Strength is consistency. Strength is returning to truth after emotion rises. Strength is holding a clean boundary when guilt tries to rename it cruelty. Strength is admitting when you were wrong without turning one mistake into a collapse of identity. Strength is changing direction when truth requires it. Strength is knowing you can survive another person's disappointment without becoming their enemy. That is the kind of strength your next season requires. Not hardness, not suspicion, not superiority. You are not becoming better than everyone around you. You are becoming more responsible for the life and attention placed in your hands. This is why the chosen one identity cannot be reduced to being special. Being chosen carries stewardship. If you notice patterns earlier, you must become responsible for what you notice. If you have influence, you must become responsible for how you use it. If people come to you for strength, you must learn that strength needs restoration too. If your family depends on you, you must learn that your boundaries protect the quality of what you give. A person who never rests eventually begins giving from depletion. And this is where generational legacy enters the message. Some battles are not only about what happens to you, they are about what becomes normal after you. Every pattern you heal changes what the next generation learns to expect. Perhaps the people before you survived by staying silent. Maybe they endured situations because they believed endurance was always honorable. Maybe they carried resentment for decades because nobody taught them how to release pain without denying it. Maybe affection was rarely spoken. Maybe boundaries were treated like disrespect. Maybe everyone knew the family secrets but nobody named them. Maybe people learned to keep peace by burying truth. You do not need to condemn them. They were working with what they understood. Some of their survival created the very ground you stand on today. Honor what deserves honor. Keep what is wise. But you are allowed to end what no longer needs to continue. A cycle breaker does not reject the family. A cycle breaker changes what the family passes forward. That difference matters. You can love where you came from and still decide that fear will not become an inheritance. Your children, your younger relatives, your friends, and even people who simply watch your life can learn from the way you choose. They can learn that love and boundaries belong together. They can learn that apology is strength. They can learn that leaving chaos does not mean abandoning compassion. They can learn that a person's value is not measured by how much mistreatment they can survive. They can learn that faith does not require pretending pain never happened. Imagine one person after you making a healthier decision because they watched you make one first. Imagine someone realizing they can speak honestly because you stopped hiding. Imagine a child learning that peaceful homes are possible because you refused to recreate the atmosphere you inherited. That is legacy. It may never be celebrated publicly. Nobody may create a monument for it. But a pattern ends. A different atmosphere begins. And years later, someone lives with more freedom without fully knowing how much courage it took for you to make the first change. Chosen one. Your life is larger than one closed door. It is larger than the person who walked away. It is larger than the season when you could not understand what God was doing. That chapter deserves compassion, but it does not deserve permanent ownership of your identity. You are not the rejection. You are not the delay. You are not the mistake you made when you were afraid. You are not the relationship that failed. You are not the opportunity that disappeared. Those things happen to you, but they do not receive the right to name you forever. Your identity must become stronger than the chapter. You are still learning. You are still becoming. You are allowed to carry wisdom without carrying shame. You are allowed to remember without returning. This is where the emotional weight begins to leave. You do not have to solve the entire past tonight. Release one piece. Release the argument you keep replaying. Release the imaginary conversation where you finally make them understand. Release the version of yourself you keep judging, because that person did not know then what you know now. They were trying to survive with the awareness they had. You can forgive that version of yourself and still choose differently today. Forgiveness does not erase responsibility. It ends unnecessary punishment. You can learn from your mistake without turning your life into a courtroom where the same verdict is announced every morning. There may be someone else you need to release emotionally. You do not have to call them. You do not have to reopen communication. Forgiveness and access are different decisions. You can release the poison while keeping the boundary. You can say inside your heart that you refuse to carry them as anger any longer. You refuse to give yesterday permanent rent inside today's attention. You refuse to allow their actions to keep shaping decisions they are no longer present to make. That release is for your freedom. It does not rewrite what happened. It simply decides what happens next. You can leave justice with God, keep wisdom with you, and continue walking without dragging the entire courtroom behind you. Now return to the decision you brought into your mind earlier. The one decision. By now, you may feel less pressure around it. You may not have every detail, but perhaps you recognize the pattern more clearly. Ask again, what is the next faithful step? Not the entire solution, just the next step. Maybe it is one conversation. Maybe it is one boundary. Maybe it is one application. Maybe it is one evening of rest. Maybe the next step is doing nothing today. Waiting can be faithful when waiting is chosen from peace instead of paralysis. Maybe the next step is to stop contacting someone. Maybe it is to finish something you have been postponing, because starting makes the future feel real. Whatever it is, do not make it larger than necessary. Fear loves to turn one step into 20 imagined consequences. Bring the decision back to what is actually yours. Then give yourself permission to respond from truth instead of anticipated reaction. You do not need to promise that you will never feel afraid again. That promise would not help you. Fear may return. Doubt may return. The old urge to explain may return. What changes is that their return no longer means they are in charge. You can feel fear and still choose wisely. You can feel guilt and still hold a healthy boundary. You can miss someone and still know that returning would recreate the same pain. Two truths can exist together. You can love and leave. You can forgive and protect yourself. You can feel uncertain and still move carefully. You can honor the past without living inside it. That complexity is not weakness. It is maturity. Now, something else becomes possible. Peace no longer has to depend on a perfect environment. You begin carrying a quieter center into imperfect situations. Someone can misunderstand you without destroying your day. A plan can change without convincing you that everything is falling apart. A delay can happen without automatically becoming rejection. You can hear no without translating it into never. That inner stability becomes one of the clearest signs of transformation. You stop interpreting every disruption as a verdict on your worth. You begin responding to events as information, not identity. This is accelerated fulfillment at the level that matters first. Your energy is available again. Your attention is available again. Your faith is no longer consumed by proving that every difficult event must immediately make sense. You become willing to walk with unanswered questions. That willingness creates room for life to unfold without constant resistance. Some answers will arrive later. Some will never arrive in the form you expected. But you will no longer require every explanation before you choose peace. That is freedom. You will no longer require every apology before you move forward. That is freedom. You will no longer require everyone to understand your boundary before you honor it. That is freedom. And freedom changes what you attract your attention toward. You become less interested in drama that once felt exciting. You become less available to conversations built entirely around complaint. You begin appreciating consistency more than intensity. You notice peaceful people differently. You notice honest work differently. You notice ordinary mornings differently. What once seemed boring begins feeling safe. What once seemed too simple begins feeling precious. That shift can surprise you. Chaos once created adrenaline, and adrenaline felt like aliveness. Now, peace begins feeling more alive because you finally have enough internal space to notice your own life. You begin enjoying what fear used to make you overlook. A meal without tension. A quiet walk. A conversation where you do not have to defend yourself. A morning when your first thought is not about someone else's crisis. Those moments may look small, but they are evidence that your inner world is changing. Do not overlook them while waiting for one massive miracle. Sometimes, the miracle is discovering that peace has become normal where chaos used to live. Chosen one, this is why God wanted your attention today. Not to make you afraid, not to convince you that disaster is waiting around every corner. The message was meant to return authority to the place where fear had been making decisions. You have been asking for help. Now you can recognize more of its forms. Help can be an open door. Help can also be a closed one. Help can be a person arriving. Help can be a person leaving. Help can be a clear answer. Help can also be enough silence to reveal why you kept asking the same question. Help can be comfort. Help can also be the courage to do what comfort would have postponed. You are not promised a life without difficult decisions. You are being invited into a life where difficult decisions do not automatically become endless confusion. You can learn, you can observe, you can pray, you can choose, and after choosing, you can remain open to correction without surrendering to panic. That balance will protect you. Humility without self-abandonment, confidence without arrogance, boundaries without bitterness, compassion without captivity. That is the person emerging from this season. A watchman who can see without becoming paranoid. An intercessor who can care without carrying what does not belong to them. A cycle breaker who can honor the past without repeating its pain. A chosen one who understands that being chosen does not mean being spared from every difficult chapter. It means becoming responsible for what the chapter teaches you, then using that wisdom to create something cleaner afterward. Now we are going to pray. Do not rush through this part. You do not need a perfect posture. You do not need perfect words. Just become still enough to let the prayer meet the place in you that has been fighting for clarity. Father, thank you for every moment of protection that I misunderstood, because it did not look like the answer I expected. Thank you for the doors that opened, and thank you for the doors that remained closed when I could not yet see what was beyond them. Give me wisdom to recognize the difference between fear and discernment. Teach me to notice what is true without turning every emotion into a command. Give me enough humility to receive correction and enough courage to stop abandoning tested clarity whenever someone else disagrees. Father, heal the part of me that learned to survive by pleasing everyone. Teach me that love does not require self-betrayal. Help me serve without losing myself, forgive without reopening harmful patterns, and remain compassionate without carrying responsibilities you never gave me. Give me peace with the endings I cannot change. Where I still replay conversations, quiet my mind. Where I still wait for an apology, release my heart. Where I still blame myself for what I did not understand then, give me mercy to learn without continuing to punish myself. Show me the next faithful step. Not every step, just the next one. If I need to speak, give me clean words. If I need to remain silent, give me restraint. If I need to move, give me courage. If I need to wait, give me peace. Protect my attention from unnecessary noise. Help me recognize what deserves my focus and what is only demanding a reaction. Let my mornings become clearer. Let my decisions become steadier. Let truth remain louder than the old fears that once controlled me. Father, where there are patterns in my family that need to end, give me wisdom to end them without hatred. Let fear stop with me. Let unhealthy silence stop with me. Let endless self-abandonment stop with me. Teach me to build something different. Let the people who come after me inherit more honesty, more peace, more courage, and more freedom, because I was willing to face what others could not yet face. Give me strength without hardness. Give me boundaries without bitterness. Give me discernment without suspicion. Give me faith that remains grounded when feelings change. And when I am tempted to reopen what you helped me release, remind me why I walked away. When I am tempted to question every clear step, remind me that courage does not require perfect certainty. When I feel alone in a decision, remind me that being misunderstood is not the same as being abandoned. Help me stay teachable while protecting the convictions that have already been tested in truth. Father, I release the need to control every outcome. I release the need to make everyone agree with me. I release the belief that my peace must wait until every person understands my heart. I choose responsibility for my own response. I choose honesty over performance. I choose peace over repeated chaos. I choose to learn from the past without returning to live inside it. Let this new chapter begin first inside me. Before the circumstances change the way I respond. Before the door opens, prepare the person who will walk through it. Before the blessing arrives, strengthen the boundaries that will protect it. Before greater responsibility comes, teach me how to carry what I already have with wisdom. And if the season ahead moves faster than the season behind me, keep my heart grounded. Do not let progress make me forget what the waiting taught me. Do not let success return me to the noise I had to escape. Let clarity remain sacred. Let peace remain valuable. Let integrity remain more important than applause. Let my future be built from truth, not fear. Thank you for the help that came disguised as redirection. Thank you for the silence that trained me to listen. Thank you for the separation that showed me where I had been giving too much of myself away. Thank you for the strength that was developing even while I thought nothing was happening. I receive the lesson. I release the old cycle. I am ready to walk forward with wisdom, courage, and peace. Amen. Chosen one, remain still for another moment. Do not immediately return to the noise. Let the prayer settle. Let your breathing slow. Let the decision you carried into this message become simple again. You do not have to force emotion. You do not need to feel something dramatic for this moment to matter. Quiet decisions can change entire lives. Remember what you learned. The closed door is not automatically rejection. Silence is not automatically abandonment. Separation is not automatically punishment. Discomfort is not automatically danger. And a clear inner signal does not become false simply because obedience makes someone uncomfortable. Test it, stay humble, look at the fruit, then honor what remains true. From this point forward, pay attention to the first few minutes of your morning. Protect them when you can. Do not give every voice immediate access. Give your mind time to arrive before the world begins making demands. Notice what thoughts return in quiet. Notice which choices create clean peace after the emotional wave passes. Notice where your energy consistently disappears. These observations can become part of your wisdom. You do not need to become obsessed with signs. You need to become attentive to patterns. There is a difference. Obsession creates anxiety. Attention creates awareness. The next chapter will not require you to know everything. It will require you to stop pretending you know nothing when the pattern has already spoken clearly. That sentence may be the one you carry with you. Stop pretending you know nothing when the pattern has already spoken clearly. You have seen enough to begin making different decisions. If this message has been part of your confirmation today, stay connected to this community. Subscribe and return when you need another reminder of who you are becoming. And if someone you love is standing between an old cycle and a new beginning, share this message with them from a place of compassion. Do not use it to attack someone. Do not send it as a hidden accusation. Let it be encouragement. Let it remind another person that clarity can return when fear stops receiving unlimited authority. And if you feel led, write one simple declaration below. I choose clarity. Let those words mark the direction, not perfection. You may still have difficult days, but difficult days do not erase a chosen direction. Tomorrow, the old pattern may test you. Someone may call. A memory may return. The urge to explain may rise. You may question whether your boundary was too strong. When that happens, remember this moment. Slow down. Observe before reacting. Ask what is true. Ask what belongs to you. Ask whether your next action is coming from fear or from tested wisdom. Then choose again. Transformation is often one honest choice repeated until the new way becomes familiar. You do not need to become someone else overnight. You need to stop feeding what you already know must end. The future does not need the old version of you to disappear with hatred. Thank that version for surviving. Thank that version for carrying you this far. Then release the strategies that no longer belong in the life you are building. You are allowed to become softer without becoming easier to manipulate. You are allowed to become peaceful without becoming passive. You are allowed to become confident without becoming proud. You are allowed to leave rooms where your spirit constantly has to shrink. You are allowed to choose relationships where truth does not threaten love. You are allowed to build a life that does not require recovering from every normal day. This is the sacred seal over the message. Let clarity replace confusion. Let responsibility replace endless waiting. Let peace replace the addiction to emotional chaos. Let wisdom guide the door you enter next. Let courage protect the boundary you establish next. Let mercy accompany the memories you release next. And let your legacy become evidence that one person can change what a whole line of people learn to tolerate. You may never know every life your courage touches. You do not need to know. Your responsibility is the step in front of you. Take it when it becomes clear. Take it without hatred. Take it without needing applause. Take it with a steady heart. Chosen one. The message was never that you had been forgotten. The message was that help may have been surrounding you in forms you did not yet recognize. Now you recognize more. Now you know what to watch for. Now you understand why the quiet mattered, why the door mattered, why the separation mattered, and why your attention matters. Do not return to sleep inside the pattern you just awakened from. Carry the lesson gently. Protect your peace carefully. Walk forward humbly. You do not need 10 more signs tonight. You need courage for the next faithful step. When it becomes clear, honor it. The old chapter can close now. You do not have to drag it through another season simply because it once felt like home. Bless what was good. Learn from what hurt. Release what ended. And move forward. Peace is allowed to become normal now. Clarity is allowed to become familiar. Your life is allowed to become quieter without becoming empty. The cycle does not have to continue through you. The confusion does not have to make every decision for you. The past does not get the final word. You are still here. You are still learning. You are still being formed. And you are ready for the next step. Walk in peace. Walk in wisdom. Walk with courage. And when the noise returns,